Hello. Have you been taking advantage of this opportunity to maybe go for a walk or head out for a run? I know people in my neighborhood sure have. Well, I'd like to take a look at a passage in Scripture that talks about two disciples who were on their own walk. It's found in Luke 24, verse 13 through 17. That very day, in reference to the very day Jesus rose from the dead, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What is this conversation that you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. It's a passage full of emotion, full of sadness and disappointment. They had this expectation of who Jesus was and what he had come to do. And yet, they had seen him crucified, and with him, all their hopes. Have you ever felt that way? Maybe you've had your own plans and expectations, and they haven't been fulfilled. They haven't come to fruition, especially with COVID-19. Maybe you had a graduation planned, or a wedding scheduled, or a trip somewhere. Maybe you had a PCS move scheduled, and now all that seems to be unraveling. Well, in the midst of their own sadness and disappointment, as they're walking back to Emmaus, Jesus walks up next to them and he asks them a question. What are you talking about? And in that, he allows these disciples to unload their emotions, their burdens, their sadness, their disappointments. And it's in that Jesus does something that I think we can all learn from. He points them to the Scriptures. He begins to unpack the Scriptures and reveal to them that everything written from Moses and the prophets really revealed who Jesus was and what he had come to do. They began to see the hope that they were looking for in the Word. I think we can find our hope as we turn to the Word. And as Jesus and the two disciples make their way to Emmaus, they invite him in. And he sits down and he has a meal with them. And as he's breaking the bread, suddenly these disciples recognize who Jesus is. And at that very moment, he disappears. Isn't it interesting that when Jesus was physically present and walking with them on the road to Emmaus, they felt the most sad and disappointed. They were unaware of who Jesus was right in their midst. And so often we can get caught up with everything going on around us that we fail to recognize Jesus right in our midst, in our presence with us. In fact, Hebrews 13 verse 5 says exactly that he will never leave us nor forsake us. It's powerful, but even more so in the original language, which is 5 times over, emphatically saying, I will never, no, ever leave you or forsake you. Jesus is with us, and he was with the disciples. But as soon as he broke that bread and physically left them, that's when they felt the presence of the Lord like never before. In fact, their sadness and disappointment became filled with joy and hope. A living hope, as Peter describes it, in the resurrected Christ. In fact, they were so full of hope now that the passage says they went back the 7 miles to Jerusalem. I imagine that last 7 miles was a lot faster than the first 7. Well, they were dragging their feet and sad, and now they had a pick-me-up in their step. They were filled with hope and excitement because they encountered the risen Lord. What a difference it makes in our lives when we recognize Jesus Christ is alive. Our resurrected hope has come.